Animals are fascinating. Their simplicity, their capabilities, and their instincts are admirable, and I believe that we as humans have a lot to learn from them. Take a horse, for example. It senses danger and it leaves. Naturally, of course, because horses are prey animals and they don't want to be eaten. But on the flip side, a mountain lion senses a horse is nearby and it runs toward its prey. It doesn't think about the horse, its newborn foal, or how much the bite will hurt. It simply thinks of the horse as its next meal. One thing for certain about animals is that they simply follow evidence. We as humans, however, overanalyze situations, we complicate things, and oftentimes we confuse ourselves. My life has revolved around animals. From growing up on a farm to becoming an entrepreneur and developing therapeutic products for animals, I and my well-being has been intricately tied to the welfare of my four-legged friends. But like most strong relationships, true understanding and admiration has come from both pain and suffering. It was March of 2011. I was studying biology on a pre-med track, my third year of undergrad, when I had a horse riding accident that left me temporarily paralyzed with a triple fracture in my C2 vertebrae. I was put into a halo traction device on a morphine drip without real clarity of what the future held. But I was told I would never ride again, and I may never walk again. And my road to recovery was treacherous, very scary at times, and long. But here I stand, in heels I might add, to tell you the story. There have been so many twists and turns for me since the accident, but after regaining full mobility, horses did come back into my life. And one horse in particular has made a lasting impact, and he has taught me so much. His name is Para. So Para is this big-bodied, beautiful horse who had a bright future ahead of him. Or at least that's what I was told at first, but after being with multiple trainers and no real results, Para came back to me with a long list of behavioral issues and 2 professional recommendations of humane euthanasia. Now, just to paint a clear picture for you, this horse was rearing up and striking out at everyone who would approach him in a stall, and everyone told me he was mean, dangerous, and unpredictable. Now, I listened intently to each of these trainers, and I noticed something interesting. I noticed the fear they had because of Para, but even more so, I noticed the fear Para had because of them. So I began seeking alternate training methods, and what I found were 2 extremes. Feed him carrots until he loves me, or use a whip until he respects me. Both felt polarized, and equally both felt wrong. It actually reminded me, interestingly enough, of an incident years prior, my very first day in college. A lesson that I learned. I sit down in class, the professor comes in, he hands out this worksheet, and it's full of all kinds of controversial topics like abortion and the death penalty, and beside each of these topics is a scale of 1 to 10. And we were supposed to rate how much we either agreed or disagreed with the said topic. Now, I grew up in a conservative family, very strong religious beliefs. As you can imagine, I adamantly disagreed with a few of these things. I really didn't think very much of it. I marked my choices, went back home. The next day, I came back into that same class and was presented with an assignment to research for 1 week the topic that I so adamantly disagreed with and present a presentation 1 week later to a room full of 300 people, convincing them of the opposite and why they too should follow my choice. That was a very difficult task, but it taught me an important lesson, and that was that the middle of the road is the sweet spot. And it can be found by balancing our instinct with our intellect and our reasoning skills. See, what I realized was that the act that I so adamantly disagreed with, or more importantly, was socialized to believe was wrong, was actually a viable solution in some circumstances. Have you ever asked yourself that question? Are your ideas really your ideas? Or were you simply socialized to believe those things? It's actually a very difficult thing to know without serious self-reflection and true understanding of both sides of an idea or a debate. See, life is not necessarily black or white. There is a lot of gray area, and I believe that when we embrace the gray, our lives become much more colorful. To me, the black and white parts of life are our instincts, and the gray area is our reasoning skills, which is derived by our intellect. See, the horse sees the mountain lion, and he's out of there. He doesn't wait around to reason with his herd to see if that mountain lion just so happens to have the same intentions as the last one. No, he simply sees the mountain lion and he leaves. What that mandatory college assignment taught me were lessons that I carried with me into my adulthood. I listened intently to both sides of stories. I respected all human intellect, and I remained independent in my own views. I really felt that I had found the gray area, and that was the main reason I knew there had to be some middle ground for my horse Para. And then one day, that lesson really sank in. It was the first day I had Para back in my own care. I saddled him up to ride him, and I admit I was a bit fearful. As I approached him, he was wide-eyed and skeptical, and I realized that we both had fear of the same thing, being hurt, him by me and me by him. Now, I've never hurt an animal in my life. It's not in my nature to do so, but I can also assure you that all the treats in the world wouldn't have convinced Para otherwise. So reluctantly, and I'm ashamed to admit this, against all my principles of avoiding the extremes, I gave Para a sedative. Out of my own self-preservation, my own fear of being hurt. I gave it to him. I walked back into the tack room, and just moments later, I walked out to be met by a horse who was nearly unrecognizable. His eyes, half shut, glazed over, his head resting up against the stall wall with his lip turned sideways. I felt like a monster, because I had fallen victim to the human superiority complex. I finally realized that I had been listening to everyone's side of their story except Para's, and he was the very subject of it all. You know, there was something in Para in that moment that I understood. I knew exactly what he felt like. As a matter of fact, I vividly remember on the day of my accident being wheeled into the trauma center at Shands University, already heavily sedated, under bright lights, listening to a neurosurgeon and a neurologist, two complete strangers to me, above me, arguing my own future. I knew what Para felt like. Para wasn't mean. He wasn't unpredictable. He was afraid. His survival instincts had kicked in, and rightfully so at that. And with that new understanding, we started over. Completely. I turned Para out with 13 other horses. He established his place in the herd. He got back to his natural instincts in his natural environment, and he actually started to enjoy life again. See, show horses, like many show animals, are treated artificially. They're kept in these small box stalls without a herd to follow. And modern lifestyle creates this artificial environment for us as humans and animals alike. And that separation from our natural environment has been proven time and time again to cause both physiological and psychological changes. Before visiting para every day, I would quiet my mind and my body by focusing solely on my breath and my energy. Amazing things started to happen. At first, para would take hours to catch. Sometimes either I'd run out of daylight or I'd give up, whichever one came first. But after I made those changes in myself, my energy, my approach, para actually started coming to me. He would leave those 13 other horses to approach me calmly and curiously. And it begged the question, why had this horse gone from striking out at other people to wanting to be with me? Now, I am a data-driven person. So I dove into research, and I found there have been multiple studies conducted, but one in particular that was published in 2018 that proved a horse's heart rate actually mimics that of the person touching or handling them. So horses, too, have been added to the list of emotionally responsive animals to humans. See, animals are master discriminators. They can depict the slightest change in smell, in our vocal variety, and in physical and emotional changes on our faces. Para was sensing all of those things silently. Para learned that I wasn't there to hurt him. I was there to help him against all odds. Turns out I wasn't the mountain lion in a human suit. Instead, I was able to use my intellect, my reasoning skills to better understand para and how he sees the world and his innate instincts. But I was also able to use my past experiences to generate empathy for him. Para's eyes began to soften, and we started to read each other's body language. As I would get bigger and taller, Para would back away from me. And when I smiled and bent down, Para would come and say hello. I realized he's so smart. His instincts are far greater than mine because he lacks all this intellectual clutter that I hold on to. He simply reads a situation, he responds to the evidence at hand, and he acts accordingly. In other words, Para doesn't complicate simple things like you and I do every day as humans. See, humans have a very developed neocortex, which controls conscious thought, self-awareness, and language. And many other mammals on this planet lack that same development, making us one of the only that's capable of humor, vulnerability, planning for the future, moral decisions, and all these other things. And sure, those things can help us create a fulfilling life, but it's a very fine line that we walk, because all of these things suggest reasoning, which must be balanced by our instincts. And that, I believe, more than anything else, is what animals can teach us. The ability to be present, to be here, right here in this moment, to listen and to make decisions based on our best judgment, derived from our intellect, and also balance it with our innate instincts. Going back to Para, a lot of people tell me I gave Para a second chance. And perhaps to some extent that is true. And by the way, if you're wondering, I do ride, I'm back in the saddle. Para and I have created this incredible partnership and unbreakable bond. But beyond that, Para has given me an opportunity to truly discover this delicate dance between our instincts and our intellect. Because when we can master that balance, that dance between those two things, not only will your life become more fulfilling, but I believe it also makes our lives so much more colorful. So, let's dance.